Always a good day when Senator Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci are going at it. Today, of course, we've got Rand Paul, who's introducing an amendment to a bill that's already working its way through Congress. This amendment is going to get rid of Dr. Fauci. Fired. You're not around anymore. And in fact, the entire NIAID is going to be changed. Most of it stayed the same, but just kind of separated. And Fauci's no longer going to be in charge if Rand Paul's amendment sticks, if he gets his way. Of course, we'll see how that goes. But here's what Rand Paul said out on his website, posted this, says, Dr. Rand Paul introduces an amendment to eliminate Dr. Fauci's position as director of NIAID, and publishing it proudly, press release right there on his website, March 14, 2022, saying, yeah, you're gone. Sorry, says here, today, U.S. Senator and physician, Dr. Rand Paul introduced an amendment to eliminate Dr. Fauci's position as the director of NIAID and replace it, the entire agency, with 3 separate national research institutes. 3's better than 1, baby. Says, we've learned a lot over the past 2 years, but one lesson in particular, writes Rand, is that no one person should be deemed to be, quote, dictator-in-chief. No one person, he writes, should have unilateral authority to make decisions for millions of Americans. Says to ensure that ineffective and unscientific lockdowns, we're going to go ahead and just get rid of Fauci. A little bit of background from Rand before we dive into the actual amendment. It says here, as recently as 2012, Congress passed a law that eliminated the National Center for Research Resources. Okay, so we've got all sorts of acronyms in Washington and out of Congress. The ABCD, LB, whatever it is, NCRR, the National Center for Research Resources. It says, and they reassigned some of its programs to a new National Center for Advancing Translational Services. Oh, great. So it goes from the NCRR to the NCATS. So from NCRR to NCATS. All right. And then they assigned other NCRR functions to other institutes within the NIA. Okay, so it's like musical chairs is what happens there in Washington. Take some money away and reform something, shuffle the papers around, and then say, look, we did some work here. And so what Rand Paul is saying is, look, we've done this before. There's precedent. We can do this again here. Here's what I propose. He says, this amendment would keep with this precedent of reorganization. We can play this stupid bureaucratic game, and says this would immediately, no problem at all, eliminate Dr. Fauci's position and replace it with 3 new directors at the following new institutes. Number 1, the National Institute of Allergic Diseases, the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, and the National Institute of Immunologic Diseases. Okay, so you can see what they're doing. They're taking the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases and they're just separating it. And then they're taking out the immunological diseases and they're separating those out too. And you all get your new agencies. And Dr. Fauci, you're fired. Rand Paul continues. Each of these 3 institutes are going to be led by somebody differently here. It's going to work differently. The president is going to appoint them and the Senate is then going to confirm them for 5 years so that we have some oversight here. The amendment also aligns exactly with the current NIAID's existing mission statement. It's in line with their principles, for crying out loud, which begins by saying, and I quote, NIAID conducts and supports basic and applied research to better understand, treat, and ultimately prevent infectious, immunologic, and allergic diseases. He says, see, look, it's right there in their mission statement. Number 1, infectious diseases. Number 2, immunologic. And number 3, allergic. So what we're going to do, in keeping with their mission, we're just going to break each one of those out. Because they all are important and they all deserve their own focus, don't they? I think so. Here's what Rand Paul's actual amendment says. This is from the document. You can see, and what's interesting here is sort of how they're going to just go into the current authority that allows the NIAID to exist. And they're just literally going to cross it out, strike it out, and replace it. So let me show you how this is going to work. In the Senate of the United States, 117th Congress, 2nd session, the purpose of this amendment, it's going to get tacked on to whatever bill it is, says to replace the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases with 3 separate national research institutes. They write. And why do we need this? To prepare, this is, I think the original bill is to prepare for and respond to existing viruses, emerging threats, and pandemics. So this bill is already working its way through Senate. He's just going to add an amendment to just modify just a little bit. Here's what it says. the amendment is proposed by, of course, RAND, and it's a number of pages, but I just clipped out a couple things where we can take a look at what is actually happening. So here it tells us, the Organization of National Research Institutes, in subsection B, paragraph A, they write, by striking allergy and infectious diseases and inserting allergic diseases. Do you see what's happening here? It's like if you're going through a Word document and you just say, no, delete this and just insert this. Literally, it says here, strike out this, allergy and infectious diseases, and insert allergic diseases. And that same format is going to be happening. They're going to take us back over to this section of U.S. Code, the Public Health Service Act, 42 U.S. Code 284A1. It's amended. They're just going to go in there and they're going to insert this. The Director of National Institute of Allergic Diseases, the Director of the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, and the same thing of Immunologic Diseases right after the National Cancer Institute. So they're going to go back in there. It's not just going to be the director of the NIAID anymore. We got to put in there. We got 3 directors, and so we got to make room for them. And you can see they are inserting that. Then they're also inserting this, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. So it's no longer just, a position where, and I'm not sure if this is a change or not, but it sounds like it's inserting this. So it sounds like to me it is a change, that these people are now going to be sort of, the Senate is going to have some say in who gets appointed and whether they are ultimately confirmed or not. So I don't know if that's a change or not of the original code, but because it doesn't say that they're striking anything, right? Maybe it is. And we all know that Fauci has been around for 30-something years. I think he's the highest paid person in the federal government, been around for a very long time. And so if the Senate now has the ability to put some term limits on this, right? It's a 5-year term under this new bill. Maybe that type of forever tenure goes away. Don't know. Here, this continues. We have another section. National Institute for Allergic Diseases, another one where they're striking the allergy and infectious diseases, and they're just reinserting allergic diseases. So it's separating it, just paragraph by paragraph, going through the U.S. code. This one, 42 U.S. code 285. And they're striking allergic and immunologic disorders, and they're inserting allergic diseases and disorders. So it's just separating it out. And this is the actual statute that would be proposed as an amendment to the bill that's already working its way through Congress. And Rand Paul may have the final say here. Him and Fauci have been going back and forth over COVID and the pandemic for years now. Fauci has sort of been relegated to the back of the line. Nobody wants to talk to him right now because we're right in the middle of election season. Rand Paul is now introducing an amendment to get him fired. So it's not looking good for Fauci. So that's Rand Paul's new attempt to fire Dr. Fauci. And he's been going after him for quite a long time. Fauci going after Rand, both of them screaming at each other in front of different Senate hearings. Rand Paul might get the last laugh on this thing. We'll see. Dr. Fauci largely has been sort of booted off the cable shows because it's election season. Nobody wants to talk about COVID now when they got to win an election. They're going to try their very best to do it. Meanwhile, Rand Paul's keeping the pressure on, and I really do appreciate that, actually. One of the biggest things that I have said about this entire pandemic is that I am very hopeful that there are politicians out there that are going to make sure that this never happens again and the people responsible for it are held accountable for what they have done to take advantage of the situation. And it sounds like Rand Paul is trying to make some consequential changes. I think it's a pretty good thing. Let me know what you think about it down in the comment below. And I'd appreciate it if you subscribed or followed wherever it is you're watching this, because I look forward to seeing you on the next one.